Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. What's going on with y'all this week? How are you feeling in your hearts? You know, things are not great globally. Locally, LA's on fire again. The Valley is on fire right now. The DOJ approved a $1 billion slush fund that will be paid out to legitimate pedophiles and other folks that were a part of January 6th. There's other stuff, but I'll say this. Mabel, our dog, is responding to her medicine, and the autoimmune disease that we thought was going to end her life is being managed. So, you know, hey, I appreciate the small victories where I can get them. If enough people organize, enough labor unions organize tomorrow to overthrow the global capitalist system and implement something much more equitable and fair, of course I'd be overjoyed. But at the moment, this doesn't look likely, so I'm going to stick with, hey, my dog is getting better and has cheated death once again, and that is something good. Another thing that's good, why today's episode, because today I'm talking to Dusty Reske of Rocketship, and hoo boy, what a good songwriter Dusty is. If you don't know who Dusty is, by the way, let me read you his bio very quickly. Born in San Francisco, California, musician Dusty Reske moved around a bit as a child before ending up in Sacramento, where he formed Rocketship in 1993. Their first album, A Certain Smile, A Certain Sadness, came out a few years later on Slumberland, followed by Garden of Delights in 1999. Here Comes Rocketship in 2006, and Thanks to You in 2019. This year is the 30th anniversary of A Certain Smile, A Certain Sadness, and folks, it is just as good as the day it came out. I remember first encountering this album at the radio station. As many times you'll hear me in these introductions say, the radio station in college, WPTS 92.1 FM, is that it? Was a very formative experience for me, both creatively and as a way that to expand my mind, to introduce me to music I wouldn't maybe not have encountered otherwise. And I've been listening to Rocketship for 30 years, I guess, then. Dusty's a really nice guy. He's soft-spoken, but thoughtful. And I thought we had a really good talk, and we get into... He moved to Texas, and we get into all that and a lot of family dynamics that I thought was very interesting. By the way, Dusty has been touring in support of the 30th anniversary. So if you live in Chicago or Philly, New York, just East Coasty type stuff, he'll be there in September. So go get tickets to that. Go look it up on the Rocketship website. You will not be disappointed. Very quickly before we get into the episode, coming up on the show next week, I'm talking to cartoonist Ron Reggie Jr., fantastic comics guy, one of the first people I read that was not a superhero comic. He's an interesting dude, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk to Dusty. Thing we were talking about before we started recording, though, about being able to do all the technical aspects of recording. I am curious if that is an intuitive thing for your brain, or if it is something that you've had to like work on.
It must be something I had to work on. I'm not sure what would be intuitive about it, except for that there is this problem solving I like to do, I think, or having a puzzle or a place I want to go and I don't know how to get there. And I think being kind of good at that within my limited capabilities. And so I can apply it to different spheres of life. And then I think after I used to use analog equipment and, you couldn't work on I guess some people could, but I didn't have any kind of background. You could work on a tape deck or anything like that. You just took it in. But computers actually started with my father in the aughts, I guess. Started building my own computers, and again, I could just put the pieces together and make it work, but kind of troubleshooting. So I'm a lot more involved in the technical side of the components of a recording studio and making music than I was previously. And but I could try to keep it basic. I mean, one of the things I was obsessing about last night or ruminating about as I was trying to fall asleep were how complicated what I would like to do is, and how I probably have to settle for this other more refined version that is within my skill set. And also, maybe I'm not a fast learner and also don't have unlimited time. And really, I want to focus on the music. I don't want to just keep programming the iPad, you know?
Yeah. No. That 100% resonates with me, especially the desire outpacing my abilities or, being beyond my reach. I think about this a lot, especially in writing a script. I think about, I often get hung up on, well, what, I make a living doing this stuff, but I'm not famous. I can't write something and know that I could probably sell it, but it'll never be made. That's usually what's happened so far. Right. And I then will write something where I'm like, well, if this got made, it should just be small, even though what I'm imagining is something large. Does that make sense? I should write for a small budget because I know even if it gets made, maybe that's all I could ever get. And I wonder if that just holds me back creatively. Does that happen to you where you'll think oh, this thing I want to do, this, whatever it is, but it is beyond what I can do. So I'm just going to put my creativity in a veal pen. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I think of is just simply financial limitations, that's always the case. I mean, in some world, you can rent Abbey Road Studios and have an orchestra come in for this little ditty you wrote in your limo on the way to the studio, and everybody's there and thinks that that's a great idea, and they're all game to do it. So, but I've always just worked as a home recordist, mostly with other musicians. And I suppose because, it kind of took me a long time to figure it out, strangely, but what I love a production. I love the craft of songwriting and all of these things that I can appreciate, but listening to other people's music and I think creating it myself, it's really all about some kind of emotional resonance. I don't think that's unusual, but it's not a theory thing necessarily. Jazz people are really interested in how all these chords are working together. That kind of is interesting to me, but it really has to work. If it can't just be an intellectual exercise. So that emotional space can really just, and sometimes it's the best served or with just an acoustic guitar and a voice. And sometimes actually the larger vision or, if I produced it like this, those ideas of the grandiose fantasies about what this thing needs to be or what the song could be, risk detaching from that original emotion, from that core of meaning, I think. And so a lot of in some ways, the troubleshooting that I do when I'm working on a song in the studio is trying to hold on to that main feeling that I originally had, discarding things, or that's the right kind of bass line, that I can write a bunch of different bass lines or what have you that would work in the song, but why does this one work and this one doesn't, or why is it missing it, and but it comes back to that basic thing, that a basic emotion that doesn't really need all the accoutrements. I mean, maybe it's like when you go to a play and they do Shakespeare and there's nothing on the stage and it's just the actors and, it's the stark light and they're dressed in day-to-day clothes as opposed to a full-bore historical production of it. You can get a lot from both. One had the budget, but maybe it's not the budget that determines, or it's a different experience or something.
I don't know. That's so interesting because does it start for you with the emotion or the feeling, or like when you write a song, and obviously not, I don't mean to like put like an algorithm on you where it's like every time this happens, but in general, would you say that like you have like an idea about something, or does it start really like just like amorphously as an emotion, as something inside you that then you are able to like channel into like a guitar, or say something like that?
It happens a couple different ways, but usually it'll be a chord combination and maybe a melody comes along with that, and I get a kind of feeling from it. Sometimes I'll have a lyrical idea first, and that I want to put to the music, but usually it's from messing around with chords or something on the guitar, and then trying to grasp. Okay, what is it that I like, or what should it do now? Like, what would be cool for it to do from this point, and just figuring out from there. And then a song has a bunch of, or pop music has a bunch of things that are usually in there. And so trying to think about how to get those things in there. That's the problem solving part of it.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think we have similar brains, because I think I work in the same way. Like I mess around and I'm like, well, that's boring. Okay, there's something inside. There's something in my chest with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do I do with it then? And then it's like, well, if I go to this chord, well, that's kind of boring and that doesn't do anything for me. So I get it's both, it's some kind of interplay between that problem solving thing in my brain and something and I'm not saying this is for you, like where it's located bodily, but I'm like, I feel it in me and I locate it in my chest, but like, and it's some kind of interplay between those two things. Yeah.
I'd say so.
So I guess then, have you always been an emotionally aware person? Because it seems to me to actually recognize that stuff, you have to be in your body and you have to be able to recognize the vicissitudes of your own body to be able to like, if like that sparks something in you, you have to be, oh, okay, there's something there. As opposed to like when I was younger and I was kind of really cut off from my emotions, I was not in a space where I could. I think a lot of my songwriting, or even like writing comedy or something like that, it was kind of emotionally dead because I couldn't access that stuff. Were you always like this?
Well, I think I've always been, I've always felt a lot, and maybe there's this idea of the highly sensitive person. I might be one of those kinds of people. But it's always, I think, I don't know that I was really aware of it. I just took it for granted. It's only with a mindfulness practice of the last few years where I've, in some ways, I've understood a lot more, or have seen how I feel and react to the world more moment to moment. And also being in therapy for a few years, so I was thinking a lot about emotions. With relation to my process, I think when I was younger, I didn't think so much about my process, or didn't have a critique of how it worked, but would just write a song using what we were just describing, essentially using my emotions as a guide. And, it's not just exclusively that. There's intellect too, and aesthetics and other things, but which all are interrelated. But as I've gotten older, or as I've thought about it more, I really, well, part of it was due to thinking about art and music specifically, and thinking, about in some ways formulas. And thinking, well, pop songs, they've got to have this and this. And then there's always some example where you're like, well, but that song doesn't, and it totally works great. Same for movies or whatever it happens to be. There's all these exceptions, and you think, well, what? And finally, I determined that there wasn't really very many formula, at least for me, formulas that one could apply that could just make something good. It has to have these things in it, like a great melody. Pop music's got to have a great melody, except for all those ones where it's not so great and you think it's awesome anyway, or interesting chords or great lyrics. I mean, I had this idea that maybe I'll come back to it. I'll finish my point, but that there was some kind of, it's almost an intangible in a way why something works. I think I after the fact, sure, I can analyze it, but it really does come back to the emotions. It's like, well, why is this record that's in this one genre not doing it for me, but it's in this, very similar style, same kind of singer, but this one really is doing it for me. And after the fact, I can maybe piece it out, but it's always really, it's about the feelings, and it's creating somehow, but it's not formulaic.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? I'm about to say something. I want to preface it by saying this. I'm about to say something that I think is a generalization, and I don't think it actually holds, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I think there's some nugget of something in there, and that I think, at least for me, how about this? If I just say it about myself. When I listen to something that feels singular, or that feels like a singular expression of a person, like one of the reasons why pop music, like mainstream pop music, doesn't appeal to me, and I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that, I'm just saying it doesn't do anything for me, is because it doesn't feel like it is an actual expression of the person. It feels more like it is something that has emerged out of a commercial need for X, Y, or Z, or if not a commercial need, that it is emerged from this stage of capitalism. Like Sabrina Carpenter, whatever. I don't have a problem with her, but I'm just saying that, like, her music to me, if I hear it, I'm just like, okay, it doesn't do anything for me, because it feels like it's just like someone at some stage was like, well, we need like a millennial or a Gen Z Madonna. So here is this person, and whether she fit into that slot already because that's what she was doing, or whether she was created, either way, it just doesn't do much to me. But I listen to, like, whatever, your music, right? There, it feels like it is emerging naturally out of you as a person, or you and the people that you perform with, right? And I wonder if that's it, that if there is a authenticity to something like that, where the emotion feels, because it is emerging from a human being without the kind of like commercial necessities of this kind of necro-capitalist phase that we're in. I don't know. Again, I'm maybe like stretching.
I've had the same thought, actually, and I feel very similarly. Again, what's interesting in a way is how intangible that is, but it definitely comes through. And I mean, in some ways, I've thought of it in terms of extrinsic or intrinsic motivation. And it's like, I don't know why I think I can hear extrinsic motivation by an artist, that is, they're doing it for other reasons besides they need to, or in other mediums. But sometimes it seems really obvious to me, or it leaves me cold, or I think that must be the reason. It's a ploy for dollars somehow, and I don't know how one hears that difference, or why.
Yeah.
Why does that correlate with feeling? And I think as well, it does break down, because we can probably think of commercial music that you're like, yeah, they were just trying to write hits, but it's really amazing for me anyway.
Totally.
Or as well, heartfelt things that people really, it meant a lot to them to put out that I didn't care for too. So, but I think that those are really strong tendencies that one finds in art.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just thinking about this stage because you're right. Because like one of my favorite bands is the Monkees, and how much of that was first of all not written by them. Everything before the Head soundtrack was not written by them really, and it was written by like the hit makers of the day. And but maybe that's the thing. Maybe for them, yeah, they were the hit makers of the day. Boyce and who are their other writers? I forget exactly, but like. Maybe there is something though in them that that maybe music now is not capturing for me. I don't know. Again, maybe this is just so personal that I can't extrapolate anything larger from it.
I don't know. I think like I went into the Bacharach David catalog pretty heavily in the last couple of years, and they're commercial songwriters. And they're trying to write hits, and it really comes out in Hal David's lyrics. They're very. He uses the same rhymes a lot, the same themes over and over again, and it's pre-Dylan, if you will, in his use of language and and subject matter, I think. But then the Bacharach's music underneath it is really complicated. He has this jazz background and was an arranger for Marlene Dietrich for 15 years or something, and toured around with her all the time. Has these really developed chops within orchestral music. So in a way, he's kind of dumbing down his skills to write these pop songs, but they're amazing pop songs. Not all of them, but and can be incredibly emotionally moving and so forth. So what does one do with that? What does one take away from that? And I suppose it's that, again, well, there's just like so many variables maybe that come into play.
Yeah.
Again, there can't be a hard, fast rule, and that there is like, I really love Air Supply.
Yeah.
And like they have a dozen songs that are like really amazing to me and very moving to me. I just love that kind of heartfelt ballad. They have great singers and stuff like that. But at the same time, I have to live with the fact that it's commercial. It's not garbage exactly, but that's what its purpose is. It's not about self-expression necessarily. It's more. I don't know. Maybe you can get so far with just craft.
Yeah. And I think that's what this goes back to, because like you had said that early on, before you kind of had thought through a lot of these things, there was maybe just an emotional instinct in you and a craft. When I listen to like your early albums, I can't tell the difference necessarily between like you having thought through the stuff and having not, because I think you have an instinct early on. You said like you were a sensitive kid and you were attuned in a certain way. And so I wonder if you have a sensitivity and it's nurtured, then one can kind of like key into a certain way of making music or way of whatever, making art that does connect without you having to have without the other kinds of things that we're talking about, either commercial concerns or intellectual concerns or any of that stuff, without that impinging on it. I don't know. I think I'm babbling at this point.
It doesn't seem like it to me. No, I think I know what you mean. I mean, I think for me, some of it does come back to the dichotomy between the intrinsic and um, extrinsic motivation, and that I I think I'm particularly intrinsically motivated, and that it's really difficult for me, or I don't. It doesn't really matter to me, or it's not a part of my formula or my creative process much to consider what this means for other people, and I can't write for an audience. It's always very much about myself, and so it's a very sure guide for me. And in some ways, I mean, my definitely as I've been making records over these years, I've always been alienating people who like my past work in some ways,
Huh.
as I just go to new areas that are meaningful to me or interesting to me. And I guess I always felt like it's the right of the artist to do so. And again, couldn't really do it any other way. But so in some ways, I'm very free from that kind of tension. It was really interesting to see playing these 5 shows for this West Coast tour, being in front of all of these people who have heard the record or know the band probably, and to recognize that their experience of my music is completely different from my experience of my music. And so it's like so inside the songs, or I'm thinking about the people who are in the songs, or I was even thinking of stuff that is going on with my daughter or what have you. Well, like none of that can necessarily be projected into the crowd, but that's the thing that gives me meaning in playing the music, as opposed to any kind of feedback. I mean, of course, I like to hear people applaud or say good job after the show. That feels good, but there's also a boundary that I feel that I have, because it's definitely it feels not a part of my world, or it's not a part of me very much. It's kind of like data points or something that no.
I want to go back then, because I think I want to put some context around this. And I've been trying to find some biographical bits about you online. I haven't found anything definitive other than maybe you were born in Texas, maybe North California.
Want me to clear that up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was born in French Hospital in San Francisco.
Okay.
In 1969.
Okay. So San Francisco, when did you move to Texas?
That would have been, I think, like 77 or 78.
Okay. So you were, a child, but full-formed human at that point. You were like 8 or 9, right?
Yeah.
What prompted the move?
My mother's new husband was from Dallas.
So parents got divorced? ?
Yeah.
Was it divisive or a amicable divorce?
They would know better than I, but I grew up with my father and his wife being friends with my mother, and our families would interact for years and years. And when we moved to Texas, my father came with his family to Texas too. So he was always in my life. Ended up being a very important, stable force in my life, having my dad there. I think that it was amicable in this, that they could be friends like that,
Totally. No. I guess what I was trying to think about was, if you are a sensitive person, sometimes that comes from having to read the room, right? And if it was a kind of angry household that you had grown up in, I was like, oh, maybe you're sensitive because you had to know what everyone else's emotions were in order to navigate it. But it seems like you had 2 pretty stable families, which I think I think it's a really nurturing environment. Maybe ?
My mother's household was not stable. I wouldn't say.
Oh, okay. So it ended up like you would end up at your dad's in order to kind of like get away from that.
There was a couple of times, yeah. In fifth or sixth grade, I moved down to Mexico with him and his family and my sister, and then when I was being a rambunctious teenager, I went in Houston. I lived with my dad for a little bit as well. But he was, it was more, I just had to tough it out with my stepfather and my mother throughout about that decade from the late
God.
70s into the late 80s in a very, still very formative stage.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you're comfortable sharing, but like, what was going on?
I would say my mother is mercurial. She's a very, she's given me a strong sense of self-love in a way. She's very affectionate, very a booster to me and my sisters, but has big mood swings. Would have big mood swings, and so and I think can get angry and uses anger as a means of control and getting what she wants, like lots of people do. They like go to war as a means of getting their needs met. And so that was
familiar from living in the world we're in 2026.
Yeah, it's a strong, big tendency in the West. Like warlike people.
Well, it's just like this kind of emotional state where, and I'm not speaking for your mom, but in which it feels childlike to me. Like it reminds me that kind of like anger. It's like what I remember feeling like before I got into therapy, where I would be angry about something I can't control or can't change. And the anger would then become the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned healthy ways to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's not really, it's not explored enough within our society what to do with those emotions, if anything. You can have the emotions and not act on them. It's a great option.
Yeah. There are healthy ways in which to deal with those emotions. Yeah.
But you also don't see it in movies or even necessarily songs or what have you. People dealing with their anger. I mean, it really is like half of the movies are about taking out your anger with weapons on other people, or you're putting somebody in their place. Argumentation. It's a cheap device to put into dramas. Like there's always going to be strife between people, but that's easier than a couple of people talking it out in a loving, peaceful, respectful manner.
I tend to think, especially being in this business, I tend to think that it comes from the highest echelons of like executives who are, if you rise to the top in the world of business, you tend to be like that kind of person. And so you then greenlight the media that represents that to you. And then all the ones where people are kind of like talking through things or figuring out alternate ways to deal with strife never gets made. And so the only depictions we have in media then are the violent ways of expressing one's emotions.
I think so too. It's a reflection of the power structure.
Yes. So, okay. Were your parents from San Francisco originally, or did they move there?
My father and my mother grew up in LA. I think my dad maybe was born in Detroit, and my mother may have been born in LA. But they met at Valley Junior College in LA.
Oh, okay.
And fell in love there, and then got involved in the racial justice movements of the early 60s, then the free speech movement, and moved up to Berkeley.
Oh, okay. So they're there at the center of it all.
Yeah.
And then what prompted the move to Texas? I mean, you said, I know she got remarried, but like, was there other work to do? Was your stepfather, did he work in my mind? Because you said early on that something about building computers, and I'm like, oh, was he like Texas Instruments guy? Like, what was going on that you guys went down to Texas?
Well, in the early 70s, I mean, I barely remember living in Redwood City a little bit in a communal household. There was the Back to the Land movement. My parents were a part of that too. So they moved to Sonoma County, and I lived in a very small town called Glen Ellen, and went to a hippie private school, not very academically focused, which was great. We just played all the time in Sonoma, the city or the town. And my father moved as well to this part of California. And I think he was working a fence builder, as a fence builder. I don't know if he met Mike, my stepfather, there too, but my mother rented out, I think it may have been a trailer on the property of our house and then they fell in love, my stepfather and my mom. And I think Mike is maybe 10 years, my mother's junior. He was a very young man. He was just maybe 21 or 2 or something like that. My mother has 2 young kids. So it was a heavy responsibility and burden for this guy to take on. And he had his own super intense upbringing that he then hadn't resolved and had brought into our family. But I think that they kind of thought Sonoma was a dead end in a way, that there wasn't much opportunity. They didn't think the high school there was good. And then Mike has a cohesive and larger family in Texas, in Dallas, and so we moved there. But this is ignoring the tendency, which I now see in my mom's life, which is that somehow the best way of describing it is she's addicted to moving. In a way, I think there's a dopamine relationship that she has with constantly being on the go. And so I don't know why we moved there, beyond really that my mother loves the change. She loves, she likes planning it, the new thing, leaving, any kind of problems you have, you can just kind of leave them behind.
That's exactly what I was thinking. There's the tendency I see with people where they think, oh, if I move to this place, if I move somewhere, whatever I'm feeling will change. And then there's some. I have friends in recovery. I forget wherever you go, there you are, something like that.
Yeah.
So then you go, one goes, oh, well then I'll move to a different place and maybe things will be different. And then, it's not.
Yeah. It's always idealized, the thing. And then you get there and there's the actual critters or, the pollution or the neighbor or whatever it happens to be. Yeah.
Right.
Or you're alone, it's like when my mother she was an only child. And so she's a human like the rest of us, and so needs people, but then she's a rugged individualist in some ways who doesn't like the constraints of social connections. So is always vacillating.
Yeah. So how do you think this formed you as a sensitive person? Because I'm trying to think again about a lot of times on this show, when I talk to people who grew up kind of emotionally aware, or at least in touch with their emotions, maybe you couldn't name them or whatever, but you at least knew that they were happening. Whereas for me, they were kind of behind a glass window and I was just watching them. I'm like, oh, that's funny. That's interesting. That's happening over there. I'm at a zoo for my own feelings. How do they grow up in a bubble of some sort that kind of protects them and lets them be who they are. I'm kind of curious how this all worked to allow you to be someone who was sensitive.
Well, I think my mother's very sensitive. And I think my stepfather, Mike, as well is so. but they both brought their dysfunctional patterns, family patterns, into raising me and my sisters. And my mother doesn't generally get along with her partners for a variety of reasons, I think. So there was lots of argumentation. But um, Mike is he's an incredibly intelligent person, and but also very critical.
Hmm.
And so I grew up with as we all did, with this cloud of delegitimacy in a way. Or I remember getting a 98 on a math test, and him asking why I didn't get 100. And I thought I'd improved myself from my
Yep.
D average, that kind of thing. And so it was very oppressive. But I remember at a very early age that think having him as I mean, it's complicated when you're a kid because I loved him as well, but in some ways, I never fully had legitimacy to me, as I always thought, oh, that's bullshit, for like some of his takes or whatever. But you still have to sit there at the table or whatever and go through it. And he was a funny, interesting person too. So that's partially why these things get so confusing emotionally, are so hard to detangle with.
Yeah.
It's easier people were just pure evil or
Yeah.
something, but they're not, and
Yeah.
he had his burden from his childhood. So I think the sense that I think I wasn't actually able to develop very, very well. A lot of it is just the American way of life. We're just in a suburb of Houston. I think institutionalized schooling is really destructive to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was to me too. It's just I wasted so many years of my life doing things for other people. And
Mm-hmm.
you can really lose a sense of yourself, which is part of the idea to develop laborers. And but the sensitivity never went away. And so really, that's when I really started to get into music as a balm. I would say probably just remember like doing my homework and with headphones, or sitting in my bed and listening to Prince or Genesis, Abacab, whatever I was
Yeah.
into, Van Halen, and just uh, grasping onto that.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all familiar in different ways to me. I am curious though. My own, I went to public school, and I think a lot of it was designed to just like shut up and do the work. And yet I was able to be me in a lot of cases. And there were teachers there who did nurture that in me and who allowed me to just kind of like follow my creative whims with different projects and things like that. And I'm curious, were there people in your life who did nurture that in you? Or was it all just kind of like conformity, conformity, conformity? And then you get your own little space when you're listening to music?
Well, my mother and stepfather, in some ways, aren't very conformist, although they, like so many hippies in the 70s, in the Reagan era, went straight
Mm-hmm.
and got jobs. And, you know, it can be expensive to live. So there was always that. And I remember being a hippie in the 70s and running around naked and swimming in the creek, and that other way of being. And I had also been to Mexico visiting a few times and could see how happy you could be with having very little. Just kids at the train station selling chiclets. I just remember their smiling faces. And here I was, kind of a miserable fourth grader or something like that. But they were incredibly happy, seemingly, under these trying circumstances, with no shoes, selling gum at whatever, 5 years old. And so I had a lot of inner resources in that regard, and ideas of how to. I guess I became very resourceful myself. We moved a lot within Texas, so what in my maybe it was sixth or seventh grade. Seventh grade, I think, where I went to 3 different middle schools just within Houston. Boom, boom, boom. And finally had some stability for high school. But I was never really around other people enough or mentors long enough for them to have much of an influence on me. There was really just my parents, and then my dad was there, and Marcia, his wife, and those two are still together. They have the stability that I never had growing up, that I could never see. But a long-term marriage of respect and care, and like a lifelong project. Of course, they're like anybody else; they have things to work through, but.
Yeah.
A nice counterexample that I didn't appreciate back then, but do now. And it certainly had an effect on me. My dad was always I always felt his strong love, and he didn't have the kind of big mood shifts and swings that could make me feel like perhaps I wasn't worthy or unloved or what have you, that I could feel at home.
Okay, well then what is it that allows you to become you? Does that make sense at all? Like it doesn't seem like there are a lot of pathways to allow you to be in tune with yourself, or to understand, to do the things that you would need to do to become a good songwriter, somewhat as you are, right? What is it that gives you that space?
Well, I think I was kind of listless when I was 13, 14. My parents bought me an electric guitar, a Fender, and an amp. I still have that amp, and a drum kit too. Didn't get as good on drums, but started to learn that a little bit, those skills. And then when I was living in Houston, there's some friends who could kind of play instruments, and we did the thing where you record on a tape and bounce it to another tape and overdub, and that seemed really, really cool. We were playing it to all our friends. It was absurd, kind of jokey, gimmicky music or what have you, but that seemed really exciting. We got together a few times doing that, and my friend, he's a composer in LA now, Christopher Knight, also came into the scene. He was incredible on keyboards, still is. And I could see that the thing that I was hearing through speakers all those years, it could be something that you did too. But I didn't really fully embrace that until my senior year. My mother moved away out of Houston with her new partner up to Montreal, Canada, and took my sisters with me. I stayed behind with my grandmother in Houston so I could finish school. My high school year, and that social circle that I was a part of in high school was really meaningful to me. But I couldn't kind of keep it together emotionally, and my studies were lagging. And so my mother by this time had left Montreal and was in Sacramento, California, and I joined them there. And so my senior year, I changed high schools and started going to Sacramento High, where I met two of my best friends, Alan Young and Josh Berkeley. And Josh Berkeley had a little 4-track recorder. He lived out in the suburbs, and we started to get together. And we, again, kind of picked up with kind of jokey kind of little ditties, but he could play guitar and I could too. And so we started to do that regularly. I would just spend the whole weekend there. His father was nice enough to let us just hole up and eat fast food and just be like, 17, 18-year-old kids, and make some noise in there. And I really started to it was a wonderful experience of both camaraderie and the beginning of my creative life. It's, again, something I kind of grasped onto. I can't say I had a lot of interest before, except for watching TV my father had gotten me into reading classical literature or the classics, and that's stayed with me through my whole life. But it wasn't enough to sustain me. So that's kind of where I'd say in Sacramento, where it starts to become more of a something I'm spending more time doing. And I'd say with Josh, that's where we start to eventually write our own music, our own songs.
Was there something you had wanted to do with your life before then?
No, I wasn't one of those people who have plans or 5-year plans. No, nothing against doing that at all. I do remember going to the orthodontist and thinking, "Oh, I could be an orthodontist," because I noticed this person wasn't doing any of the work; it was all of his nurses.
Right.
So it's just that's kind of just like sitting around and watching TV. That sounds good, but I never pursued it. And although all of the adults in my life went to college, I wasn't particularly academic, and my intellect was underdeveloped. This happens a lot in formalized compulsory schooling. For many people, there's just not it's not the right combination of factors to support somebody. But also, just I think I was I just wasn't interested in it at that point. And so, no, I had no idea, and indeed never thought of doing music as a career. You know what I mean? Like that's not. Hopefully, any artist, is realistic that that's probably not going to be something you could ever make money off of. And so, it never occurred to me. I've never pursued any kind of career in any field.
So it was really just that. Because what I'm still trying to figure out is what is the switch from being someone who's like maybe writing just like jokey songs with your friends, like you said. I don't know what if that's like more like Dead Milkmen type stuff or Weird Al, wherever you're falling on that spectrum. The Dr. Demento spectrum, wherever you're on that. To writing something that's maybe heartfelt or something that's like emotionally aware. Like, what is the change? Is it just that friendship, where you feel like you can kind of be honest, or like what's going on? Because this is what, like, now we're in the early 80s, right?
This is more like 87, 88.
Okay, late 80s.
Yeah. There is kind of a big shift, which is that Josh and I were doing these kind of more humor songs, and then we do "Leave Me Alone." We like try to cover that New Order song. It's the last one on. Is it Power, Corruption, and Lies? I think verbatim. We're going to record it verbatim on the 4-track. I think it comes out pretty good. And then, I'd only lived there 3 or 4 months and still had these ties to Houston, and wanted to join my friends back in Texas to go to college. And so I moved to Austin after graduating high school and go to Austin City College, or whatever it's called there, for a semester. Most of my friends are going to UT. And it's similarly directionless, and a lot of the kids are my friends from high school. They're now in frats and living in dorms, and it's a different. I just don't see them very much. But I do live with Christopher Knight, and so I've socialized with him, and to have that kind of really tight bond. But go back to Sacramento at Christmas, and Josh Berkeley gives me this tape that he's made with his friend Aaron. I can't remember his last name right now, but which is more synth pop. It's like Depeche Mode, or it's not exactly Knights or Ebb, but I guess more New Order kind of stuff. He has Aaron has a Emu sampler, so there's drum machines and all of this stuff, music that I was already into. And I go back to Texas with this cassette, and I just remember specifically listening to it on the bus as I'm going to Austin City College with headphones, and thinking, I want to go back and do this. Like, I'm not feeling it here somehow. And it's maybe a little more desperate than that, kind of like, what am I going to do? Maybe the lease was up, or am I going to do it? Maybe I had started, I think, the second semester, by January, February, or what have you. And so quit school and then go back. And that's really my focus, is to join Josh and Aaron in their band. And I think it was called I know it was called This Lever Day, LEVR, which it didn't make sense to me.
But, THISLEVRDAY.
Yeah.
This Lever Day.
Yeah.
Good. I like it.
Yeah, it's still, I don't know what it means. So, and then we started making this synth pop music all the time with Aaron. And so that becomes my focus. And then I'm just working day jobs. Maybe I was working at Original Pete's Pizza in Sacramento. I worked at a yogurt shop for a bunch of years. But it all became about the music.
But are you able at this point to access what's inside you and actually like transmute that into music, or is that a process that you have to go through?
I don't know, but I think it must have been the same kind of process where you have how do you make this choice? Like what works or what doesn't? So you have to choose certain notes or certain chords, or like, what's the chorus going to be? So, I think I would have been with these two other young men, deciding that based on our instincts or our feelings, so it's beginning to learn how to, I guess in a way, learn the craft.
Yeah.
But the artistry too.
But you were someone at that point who was comfortable, like, if you felt sad, you could tell your friends that. Like, I'm saying this because when I was younger, maybe I could say like a broad emotion like that, but I couldn't articulate the specifics of it. And I certainly couldn't. It took a lot for me. Yeah, I was trying to think. I'm like, it really took a lot for me to say these things to my friends, which is why it took me a long time then to be able to like make something worthwhile, because I didn't have the craft yet, and I didn't have the emotional awareness. But like, you were able to kind of like access, or it would talk about that stuff, make it manifest with your friends.
I don't think so. I don't think that we were talking about emotions or what this song is about, or this reminds me of so and so, let's do a song about that. I think it was probably more focused on the craft side of things, and then a lot of the music that we were into, whether it was REM or New Order, or so many of the Cocteau Twins or what have you, the vocals were less important. The lyrics were less important. They were mixed low, or Michael Stipe is mumbling. And so it's kind of a vibe. And so it seemed we were definitely in the phase of, and even into Rocketship, I would say to a certain extent, the phase is, I want a song, so I need to write some lyrics for it. Okay, now I have some lyrics, and so I have a song, as opposed to it being a lot more purposeful, or discarding things, maybe trying harder.
Yeah. So when do you think purpose comes into your creative life?
Well, I mean, I think more broadly, this thing with Josh was very much our focus. We weren't thinking about trying to get girlfriends, or we wanted to be in a band. His brother joins the band, his younger brother, Ben Berkeley. And then we got a drummer, Jim, who ended up being the Rocketship drummer too. So that was all very purposeful. And I think that the process has just been the same since that time, which is, this is my passion. Now I think I've thought about the craft a lot more and seen what people are capable of, and so I try to think a lot more about what do I want to do in this song? Does it need? Is it better if it's a universal kind of lyric that doesn't have any specificity, or is it all about the specificity of my own life and naming names? And these kinds of things are questions I didn't really have in the past, when I first started out.
Is it around this time where you actually make a existential decision about this stuff? Because this is really reminding me of when I discovered I had played, my parents got me a guitar when I was 15, maybe. I loved it, but it never even entered my mind that it was something that like I could do or wanted to do, or I could really write my own songs. And then when I meet my friend Kyle in college in freshman year and we start playing music together, it becomes now a lifelong practice of like wanting to make things and like trying to pursue it for real and doing, eventually being able to. But like, I don't think I made the decision until like my like late 20s, early 30s, really. And I'm curious for you, like when do you think you make that decision?
I don't think I ever made it, really, in a way.
Huh.
I think it was a lack of other possibilities, in a way. I'd also seen I'd fallen in love with people, friends, communities, places, and lost so much that I didn't really maybe count. Maybe that's why I didn't and still don't really make 5-year plans. Couldn't really count on plans coming to fruition or not falling through. And I think I just loved doing it so much. It's just a day-to-day occurrence. It's about waking up and playing guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have the time and, between other things I need to do, I can try to record it or work on it more. Just it's always that. And I do recall at points various adults encouraging me to go back to school. At various points, I would go back to school, and I really love college. So it's such a different experience than high school. But always would come back to the music, and yeah, it was never a conscious decision. I guess it was a instinctual, like, this is my bliss. I followed my bliss,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Because I am curious though, then like what prompts you eventually, you talked early on in this about, you said mindfulness and therapy. That's the stuff that like really allowed me to be a creative person in a deeper way. And I'm curious, like, when does that come into your life and why?
So I started going to therapy to try to repair a relationship I had been in for 7 years. And the idea was that she was going to work on her stuff and I was going to work on my stuff, and then it would make us better. But it didn't save the relationship, but I continued on with my therapist, Janet, for 3 years or more than that. And so that a lot of the, like, I've had access to my emotions and that expression within my art that has relatively been healthy and hasn't been a hindrance to my creative process. But not being necessarily in touch with my emotions, or this pursuit of the id, or bringing these id, bringing it to the fore, or bringing it into the ego concepts, that is more new. And what has been good for is my interpersonal relationships, because I had so many, I think, dysfunctional interpersonal relationships growing up, and then just one after the other in my romantic relationships. I mean, it's been heavy singing these songs on tour, because I'm like, well, this is another song of heartbreak and romantic dysfunction. it's like I can't actually. It could be sad singing these songs. It wasn't just it's like a celebration of this record coming out 30 years ago, but the music isn't celebratory party music in a way, even if sometimes if it's more peppy, the beat or what have you, or the tempo. So that's been present there now through therapy, and then starting to study Vietnamese Zen Buddhism, I've, which has probably helped at, at least, if not more, as much as therapy. Then I'm much more in touch with, more mindful of what's going on with my emotions. I can bring that to other people. I can talk about it. If they're open to it, because some people, they don't want to talk about stuff like that, or they haven't, developed that muscle very much. But that's part of the mindfulness too, is to only go where other people are comfortable with. So it's mainly, I don't know that it's affected my music exactly, but I'd be surprised if it didn't. But maybe I just don't know what it is yet. I should think about that.
Yeah, I guess I'm still kind of just baffled that you were a sensitive kid and you were just allowed to be a sensitive kid, because I was always told, like, maybe not told verbally, but just definitely the indications, the vibe in the air was, tamp it down. Don't talk about emotions. Let it, like, push it in, or just don't, if not push it in, don't let it out. And it just seems like you were just allowed to, which is a good thing. You were allowed to be sensitive and you were allowed to feel, even if you said, like, you weren't, maybe it was more intuitive when you first started songwriting. Maybe it was more just like craft based, but like, yeah. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, well, I would say that my mother is very on the surface with her emotions. I would think of her as being one of the more authentic people that I've been around. She's like she presents who she is mostly, and she doesn't like duplicity or the putting on of airs very much. She's very suspicious of it. Then the flip side of that is that if she's angry, she's going to act angry. Or if she's judgmental about something, she is maybe going to say what she's going to what she's thinking or feeling, and if people get hurt by that, she's being honest.
Yeah.
But that also means, that she could be very, if she was down or her feelings were hurt or she was having a hard time, there was that too. So there were tears amongst all of the kids, and I remember seeing that in my mother as well. So there wasn't a taboo around expressing feelings, and which again, as I just described, can be good and very bad too. It's important to put boundaries out of respect for other people on your thoughts and what you want to express.
Yeah, I think, something you said earlier too, that kind of like resonated with me, where it's just like, these people in your life, they're not villains. You can't just like hate them or think because a lot of it comes from a bad or dysfunctional place, not a malicious place. And so you kind of just have to contend with it at some point. That they're a full human being, and there are these good parts, which are that sensitivity, even if there are the kind of like negative parts, which are that at some points the negative emotions are unleashed upon you.
It's hard as a kid because you don't know, you don't have the skills to deal with it. And also it's too late when you're, beyond middle ages. I am now. It's like a lot of my neurology is just hardwired already.
Yeah.
But one of the immeasurable minds is understanding. And I really love that idea of that there's no limit to the amount of understanding you could apply to a situation or a person, and so even somebody who does awful things, or that we think are doing awful things, we can look into what those causes are. This because that because this. There is nobody in isolation that is just a bad guy, or what have you. And people have their own burdens. And also in this tradition, of course, everybody suffers too. So even, maybe even more so, the people who bring pain to others and as well are just like us and suffer and experience pain too. So that opens up a lot of love and compassion. These other immeasurable minds, as they're called, for these people who I don't know if they were doing their best, but who I found myself with, and they're also a part of me. There is no separation from that of myself from them, where I get to put them in a container. I have to deal with who they were and who they are, and who I've become because of those experiences with them. And but also can break the patterns, have that opportunity. Don't need to keep perpetuating this. How far some of this goes back, we don't even know, and it's being handed down over generations.
Yeah. Dusty, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being open. This was an absolute delight to talk to you.
It was my pleasure, Andy. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk to you too.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye.